So, Anthony, now we are recording. So now everything we say is on record, right?
Thankfully, what we've always discussed before never is, so that's good.
That's great, yeah. Anthony, as you know, the reason why I wanted to talk to you today was because I have shared an article I wrote with you about the new non-existing offset machine. And the reason was because you and I, a couple of months ago, spoke about Heidelberg's new 21K, and then later Koenig and Bauer also announced the 22K, which I don't think came as a big surprise to either of us. But maybe more of a surprise is how these machines apparently may not fit into a majority of the commercial printers in the world of today. What is your view? Is it speed or versatility that is most important?
Well, I think you've got complete separation in relevant markets and relevant countries, as we discussed before. But I think in those truly optimized industrial print businesses, the 21, 22K machines make perfect sense in terms of keeping their operating cost per sheet at the lowest level they can for the highest throughput. You've then got the labor cost that sits alongside that, and in terms of the labor shortage as well. So that makes sense. However, as I said before, you might be talking a significant amount of the PPV in terms of the region that sits within, but also there's still several hundred or a couple of thousand of print shops sitting beneath that have a completely different requirement. So I think it's about the right product at the right time and in the right strategy about what you're going to do with those relevant clients. I think flexibility and variability is where the sort of, let's call them the SME print shops sit still, because natural causes, they're not going to compete so much in terms of the economic side with the 21, 22K machine. So I think there's a sort of a disparity, relevant nature about where you sit with what. I think for me, I think the relevant people who bring products to market have to be very wary that they could leave a lot of potential customers behind.
Mm. And one of the things I claimed in my article was that, I remember when I was very young in the printing industry, I remember that often an argument when you were selling a press was basically take these old, slower presses out of the production and bring in one bigger and faster press. That was a very dominant KPI when selling machines in the past. But in the meantime, I think that the market has changed dramatically. So if you were setting up a printing company, would you prefer to have two, let's say, a little bit slower presses than having one very fast press? If you look at the diversity of a normal, small, medium-sized commercial printer today.
I think if you look at it again, to be honest, more, it's very regional specific. I think, and certainly in the European market, that would be a good place to start on mainland Europe. I think once you get into maybe some parts of Germany and the UK, it'd be very difficult to carry the cost of that immediately, because you have to compete on price to get into the market. Away from that, I think in terms of having redundancy, flexibility, you can have certain substrate requirements on one machine and a little bit more, let's say, niche market on the other. Definitely, because I think the economy of scale now is that once you're getting into these bigger runs and bigger contracts, you are competing on price in the first issue. But obviously, the market has changed dramatically. The sort of big $1 million, £1 million contracts now go not necessarily into the big BPO guys, but coming back out into the direct market. So I think flexibility to the market is just as much as a huge criteria as optimization.
Mm. One of the things that I am, it is a little bit like a game, I would say, because I was playing with let's say, a scenario where you can get two machines for the same price as one faster machines, but at half the speed. If you take that into consideration, and let's say that you can also assume that with IoT and all the technology that you can operate two machines with one operator, does that change your view on what you just said?
Absolutely. But again, I think there's a huge acceleration in the market to understand how you actually do job preparation and transition. So from an output capability, makes perfect sense. I think the reality is the technology is there in certain places already. If it was, let's say, viewed differently from the outside, but then you're talking about the whole sort of pre-production process, where there's an acceleration from the vendors to actually simplify that process and actually understand that process and educate the people to then get to the two platforms. But yes, I think with the very nature of short runs coming down now, it's again we come away from the 21K machines as such as a sort of a top level. The make ready component of a printing job is more important than the printing. So as you say, speed is a byproduct of actually getting into a sellable sheet as quickly as possible.
One of the major or larger online printers in Germany, Saxo Print. Both of us have been there. It's a huge Heidelberg facility and an amazing company, by the way. One of the things that maybe plays a little bit into what you're talking about also when you look at the entire workflow here is how you see the entire process from print to finishing, because it seems that they have chosen a path where they robotize the guillotines and cut sheets, basically to avoid foldings and basically to use let's say products like the horizontal stitch liner for folded products, and maybe also conclusion that a lot of the products they produce are flat products. Do you see? I mean, because one of the things that I was surprised about at Drupal, not surprised but amazed about, was that you see that it seems that the binding and the finishing processes are developing way faster than the printing processes, right?
I've been a firm believer for 20 years that post-press and pre-press are far more important than press. You know, when you get into the technology platforms of printing presses now, it's not like 10, 12, 15 years ago where you had to be hugely technically skillful to get a very good job out of a machine. With the very nature now of transfer systems, ink water balance, impress control systems, spectros, how you feed that in terms of this whole conversation again, how you accelerate from a customer requirement to a sellable sheet on press is the main battleground for the first part. But then secondary, actually converting that with a minimum amount of touch points. And you go into any printing company, you start printing 400,000 sheets a day. The first thing you look at is the pallets on the floor and actually the post-production process, which is far more important. So I think, in terms of the next stage of this sort of evolution we're talking about flexibility and variation. The biggest problem is that if you create flexibility and variation in Postgres, there's not necessarily the skill set in the market now to be able to utilize that. So again, strategically, if you go into market, what is it you produce? How do you produce it? And that's why I've always been a firm believer that you reverse engineer printing products from the last touch point. Because as I say, the press now is the given. That is the given. You can produce optimized quality, job after job, job after job, job after job. Postpress can absolutely crucify your organization within a 6 to 8 hour working period.
Another claim I have in my article, and also I shared with you a spreadsheet that I have done just to see if I was totally wrong in my assumptions. And I know it's not a detailed spreadsheet, and it will be available for download so people can play around with it for themselves. But I was just wondering, because one of the things that you said was that after we put in some numbers that we agreed on was approximately correct, then it was actually a price point where the price was almost similar to a click price on let's say, a modern press today or digital press today. That is not so important to me right now, but what is important to me, with that in mind, and remember back from the CDI 52, from the DTOs, from the, let's say, 3-4 generations, smaller, more analog kind of machines till today, when the big OEMs in the offset industry talk about a decreasing commercial market, do you think there is a tendency that they have simply lost an opportunity because they have not developed technology in that span where digital has taken over?
I think there's two points in that. I think we've got to be very careful. Everybody seems to measure things in PPV. Okay, well, packaging's easier because there's a lot more SKUs, and obviously you generally do very high run lengths to get the stock into place. And then you look at the commercial side of the business where the PPV might be static or slightly incrementally decreasing, but you look at the physical amount of transactions in print and it's up 20-25%. So again, commercial print is not dying. It just has far better fit for purpose, and people actually understand how to utilize it. And again, using the online guys, they've made print procurement at a small level very easy for people to do that. So I think that's one thing. Secondary, what you're discussing now is the offset market about possibly two machines with more flexibility, variations of specifications is absolutely right. Because if you look at what's happened in digital space and you have this whole ridiculous conversation between break-even points between digital and offset, and come on, I said to you before that that's a very interesting space, but it's product-centric. And you've got a whole calculation that needs to come in terms of uptime, power, everything that goes into those calculations. But I think that digital providers have made it very much easier for people to understand how to do shorter run work. Doesn't mean it's the right platform, but from a sales engagement process, I think they're a far slicker organization at getting people to go on a journey with them. And then, of course, you've got the other big issue that we don't talk about is if you go into any sort of, like, let's be honest, an Indigo facility or a Canon or a Ricoh, you look at the age demographic of people running those machines against offset. So, in terms of recruitment into the organization, it's far easier to actually get people in to run a digital device, even though perversely, the new offset machines are far more technologically advanced than anything that's in digital. So it's a really bizarre dynamic at the minute about what happens. But to come back around to it, I think there is no way that print is dying to the level that people believe. It's just that we don't do these 100, 200, 300, 400,000 runs, where back in the day there was so much cash available that you just wasted 200,000 at the end into the bin. So I think it's far more targeted, and I think it's far more understood now about just-in-time, marketing campaigns and the things that we know that online print can do as well.
So, does that mean that you agree with me that the offset manufacturers, to some degree, have lost an opportunity in that middle segment? That, I mean, if you look at the Lander presentation, I remember in 2016 he spoke about the Lander hotspot, because there was like digital print on one side, there was an offset print on that, and then Lander fitted perfectly into that mid segment. But that mid segment was not covered by any offset manufacturers, even in 2016. And I was just wondering, so do you agree with me that if the offset manufacturers had focused a little bit more on short runs and a little bit more on that diversity of technology, they might have had an opportunity that were different from today?
Yeah, I think we've got to be careful, because if you look at it now, the majority of the offset producers have a digital platform to market. So what you have sometimes is a cross-contamination of the sales process about who's actually trying to achieve the sale. So yes, to answer your question directly, yes, there's been a huge opportunity missed. Lander was a very different, like you say, go-to-market strategy in terms of what they were trying to target. And, they've actually arrived now at a fantastic platform that is very relevant to the packaging market and the commercial market. But again, you're talking about 7-color gamut, but you're then talking about transition times, about the amount of redundancy time that you have to do from job to job, where, again, not that I'm just wearing the offset hat, this has all been done for the last 25 years. So the fact you can go from a sellable sheet, last sheet to first sheet in 72 seconds, and within color, within 50, well, no digital technology is near that space at all. But I come back to the same thing. I look at the demographic of people who sell digital, but they're talking about, you can always economically work out from a click cost, because people then understand a very simple number. When you're getting into these possible new business models and stuff, the human brain only probably retains 4 to 5 key components that it wants to know. So if you overcomplicate that process, and somebody comes in who's then got a very professional, prepared way of you actually getting on a technology curve very quickly, then of course you look at the very demographic of people now. Most people who are like late 50s, early 60s don't necessarily want to have a huge headache of reinventing everything. So a digital solution seems a very perfect way to combat shorter runs. But I think not just offset, I think generally in the market, we undervalue what we do. We argue about technology USPs when actually all the technologies we have available are still not being utilized at anywhere near the level they have. So coming back to the full speed argumentation, it sort of rounds up. Absolutely, there's a requirement in the market, but we are in danger as an industry of leaving the guys who keep this industry ticking over every day behind with what we offer them in terms of platforms.
That I have 2 questions left. One question is actually accumulated a little bit about something we spoke about as well, you and I, and that was like that most of the digital printers out there are probably more used for short runs than all the variable data and the books of one or the products of one. And that is for many reasons. But I was thinking that one thing that has probably changed the market a little bit is the selling prices on digital and short runs per piece. Have people, I mean, the consumers think of, okay, I buy a shorter print run, therefore it must be more expensive than per piece than anything else. So if you have a, let's say, gang printed offset print, it seems that it should be on price. If you look at the short runs, it seems that consumers have accepted a higher price per piece.
You look at the physical engagement of print. Before, you'd have to do a quotation, several samples, meet somebody, do 7 iterations of a quotation. Now you just have a very simple pick and play, which makes print a fantastic product to utilize. But coming back around, that's then lent itself to the digital space. But I think the point you're arriving at is in that shorter run, versatile market, it's far higher margin than just printing hundreds of thousands of sheets.
When you look at the market today, the one thing that we talk about here is that, of course, there is. I don't think that commercial print is decreasing. I think the measures that people are using today are wrong, because you cannot say that a market is decreasing because they sell fewer Heidelbergs or because they sell less paper. It is the value of the output that comes through. Do you think that let's say understanding is also at the highest level in both digital and in offset vendors today?
No, not at all. I can only work in relation to, whenever I start these calculations with 10, 15 years ago, when things like autoplate and impress control started to come into the market, we work out at that time that anything between 7 to 8% of your total impression count was pure waste. Not run and waste, just setup waste. So again, a couple of the companies I'm working from now who have gone from older technology to now, they're trying to measure straight away year on year. And I'm like, guys, you just saved 2 million sheets. So the PPV number in terms of what they're measuring as a count is not a sort of simple calculation like it used to be, because you have to put a weighting average into what the new technology has brought to the market. And also, as you were just saying, I think for me, with the combination of digital inkjet and then offset, but more digitized offset, as you were just referring to, you're making it far more cost effective for customers to come on a print journey with you. So I think coming back to, is there a hierarchical understanding of that? No, not at all. I think we are very sort of insular and very systematic about how we measure the success of each segment, because that's all we've done for 10, 15 years. Any of the documentation and anything I see come out in terms of reports doesn't actually represent what happens in the market. It's just a statement of a number. Doesn't mean anything.